Today we are to start. Today is we're starting a new module. We're starting a new module and a new week. So let me present my screen. 1 minute. Okay. So for module one was more of HTML and CSS, how we can structure our web application or our websites, and then beautify it or arrange it using CSS. And we spoke about a couple of tags in HTML that are very important and we'll be using quite often, like the text tags, the list tags, the link tag, table, and forms. So just with HTML and CSS, you might not be able to make an appealing website or an appealing web application because it will not be interactive. All right, it will not be all that interactive as you want, and some animations might be restricted because you might want to click on a button and see some application going on or some animation, or you want to click on a button and be able to do something, maybe change the color of your screen and the rest of them. So that's the power of JavaScript, or that's where we need JavaScript, right? And so in module two, week five, rather, which will be today and tomorrow, we have to talk about firstly introduction to JavaScript, and after the introduction, we go on to variables and data types, and then we go on to conditional logic, arrays, and objects. Okay, so for this course, for this JavaScript, there is a document that helps me a lot, and which is what I will be sharing for us now. We'll be using this document. It's a GitHub repository. I will explain to us what the GitHub repository is. So I'm just going to paste the link here so you can have access to it. Yeah. So firstly, I'm going to start by explaining what GitHub is. Okay. So basically, what GitHub is like a server on the internet where developers push their codes to. And so if you have 3 or 5 persons working on a project, and each of these persons are trying to implement a particular feature on their own. So they are not together, all right? They have their own systems in which they are implementing its feature. So which means there has to be a means for them to collaborate and push all of their codes and then merge them together in order to have the three features combined together to have one complete project or product. Okay, so that's where GitHub comes in. So GitHub is an open source application that lets developers collaborate with each other. So they make features, they write codes on their own end, on their laptop, on their local storage, and then they can now push their code to a particular repository where each of their codes should be stored together and meshed together. Okay, so but individuals can use them. So you can use GitHub on your own. You can decide to push your code to GitHub and then share to somebody else so they have access to it. So what we have here is somebody's GitHub repository where he has explained from basics within 30 days how to use JavaScript or how to understand JavaScript. So he started from day one, which is introduction, down to day 30, which is this. So he's hoping that if you can go through these things one after the other, day by day, in 30 days, you should be able to master JavaScript in full. Okay? That's the purpose of this repository. And so, since it is a repository, a public repository, we can easily go there and see his codes or see his text as it is on the repository. So that's what GitHub is. So very soon, most of our assignments will be on GitHub repository. You won't have to you won't have to send your code to Google Drive and then send me the link. So all you have to do is push your code to GitHub, just so in case anything happens to your laptop, your system, right? So if you get a new system, all you have to do is link your GitHub account to your laptop, and then you can be able to have access to your codes that are already um, on GitHub there. So GitHub is that good and friendly to use. Sorry, somebody is asking for a link. Sorry, let me grab the link now. Okay, sorry for the break. Um, okay, so now having this GitHub repository, we'll start with the first one, which is introduction, and I have it opened here already. So introducing JavaScript to us, right? So firstly, I want to bring to our notice and attention once again that um, JavaScript is a programming language. Okay, JavaScript is not like HTML, CSS, which are markup languages. Programming language. And so it has so many logics to it. It has so many technicalities to it. But so long as you put your mind to understanding it, you would for sure understand it. And once you understand it, you start enjoying programming. Okay, because the way programming is that every programming language, be it C plus, C sharp, Python, they all have the same idea. Okay, they all have the same goal they are trying to achieve. The only difference is the syntax. Okay, so it's just like we have Hausa language, we have Yoruba, we have the Igbo language, right? So if I want to say go and bring me a book, right? It has its own transcription in Hausa, it has its own in Yoruba and as well Igbo. But at the end of the day, all they are trying to say is go and get me a book. Okay, so that's how programming is as well. Sorry. Okay, so that's how programming is. So syntax basically is the way a particular programming languages, a particular programming language writes a particular code, right? So the way we print out words in JavaScript is different from the way we print out in Python, as well other programming languages. But at the end of the day, they all print out things for a user to see. Okay, so if you understand JavaScript, then you have an idea of how other programming languages would be. So the only difference is that you have to now learn their syntax. Okay, so that's just it. So starting off, there are different ways of writing JavaScript. Okay, so we have to first see how we write JavaScript. Firstly, there is an inline script. Okay, so let's see what inline script is. So inline script is when you write a, a JavaScript code inside a HTML tag. And an example of that is right here. So if you check inside this button tag, which is a HTML tag, you have on click equal to, then alert this. Okay. What this does is that once you click on this button, it brings up a pop-up on your screen saying welcome to JavaScript, to 30 days of JavaScript. So let's try it. Let me copy this line of code and I'll paste it in our editor here. So let's say I have a button down here, right? So let me open this up in our live server. Okay, so this is the first JavaScript we are learning. So we say this inline because we are writing it inside the HTML tag, right? So that's why it's inline. Likewise, CSS. When you write a CSS inside a HTML tag, it's considered an inline CSS. Okay, so now I have my button down here on the left hand that says click me. So when I click on it, you see this pop-up coming out that says welcome to 30 days of JavaScript. Okay, so because I wrote this particular line of code, this is not a JavaScript, this is not a CSS code or a HTML code, right? It is a JavaScript code. And so this automatically makes it an inline JavaScript or an inline script. Okay, so moving on, um, there are other types of scripts, which is internal scripts. So internal scripts is when you now create a separate tag for all of your scripts, okay, and then you write your scripts inside there. So example is this. So you have your HTML tags, and then inside there you now have scripts. So this tag is what we use to let our editor understand that we want to write uh, JavaScript code. Let me zoom in. Let me zoom this in. Okay. So this script tag is what we use to let um, our browser or editor understand that we are writing a JavaScript file or a JavaScript code inside your HTML. Right. So when you have codes written between the open and closed tab of the script tab, these codes you've written are considered internal, not inline, because script is not a HTML tag that does anything in particular, right? It is a tag specific for JavaScript. So this is called internal. Most of the time is what we call external scripts. Okay, because it is considered that you'll be writing almost at least 500 lines of JavaScript code. So it won't be nice that you're having all of those code sharing a small space with your HTML code. It is not ideal. So you have to create a separate file for your script code. All right, then you import it inside your HTML code. So let's see how that is done. So the ideal way is that your editor, be it VS Code or Sublime or Atom, and then you create a file for JavaScript. So this is the file for HTML. This is for CSS. So now we are going to check out how we create JavaScript. So how you create JavaScript, you right click and then you take new file. So now you can now give it any name you want, be it name or whatever. But the extension is now .js. So this is what lets us know that we are creating a file for JavaScript code. Okay, so .html for HTML file, .css for CSS file. But for JavaScript, it is .js. So I'm going to change my name to script because most developers have adopted this convention of naming their JavaScript file scripts. Some persons call it app, that's APP, right? So I'm going to call this one script. You can give it any name you want. This is just the one I've decided to go with, script.js. So with this, I've created my script file. But just like we did with CSS, after creating a CSS, to link it to your HTML because right now it is not linked to our HTML. So I want to link it to my index.html file. So I would go to my index.html file, and now inside my body tag, right? So remember the body tag starts here and ends here. So inside my body tag, I will now create a script file, a script tag, right? A script tag. And inside the opening tag, I'm going to pass in an attribute called source. So it is inside this source attributes, I am now going um, to pass in the path to my script tag that I've created. Okay. So this script tag is what I want to link here. I remember my index.html is inside this parent folder, rather. So which means I have to come outside this parent folder before I can see my script.js. So how do we do that? Remember I said use dot dot. So dot slash takes us outside. You can now see the script.js. So I can now choose script.js. So with this, I've been able to link this script file that I just created here. I've been able to link it to my index.html. So I can now start writing JavaScript codes inside my CSS, inside my script file, making this script, whatever I'm writing here, as an external script. So this is external JavaScript. Whereas this first one we did here is inline. So I'm going to take it out. All right. Okay. So this is the first thing we'll be talking about. Okay. Let's go over to what next. So the next one is introduction to data types, right? So I can just quickly go on to show you how you use JavaScript to manipulate your HTML and your CSS codes. Okay, but that would not be ideal because programming has data types, and it should be okay if you understand this concept first. Okay, you have to understand the uh, different concepts of data types in order to continue. So let's go on. So first, what are data types? So this is in JavaScript and also other programming languages. There are different types of data types, right? So the following are JavaScript primitive data types. Okay, so firstly, JavaScript is divided into two. We have primitive and JavaScript data types rather are divided into two, primitive data types and non-primitive data types. So I would like to go to that document. Yes, data types. So as you can see, it has primitive data types and non-primitive data types. So primitive data types are like the original data types. They are not dependent on any data type, right? So they stand on their own, right? Why non-primitive are more like they are dependent on the primitive data types in order for them to be formed. So let's see what primitive data types are. So firstly, the first data type, like I said, the first original data type is numbers. Numbers, which is divided into integers and floats. Okay. Um, Integers are whole numbers, while floats are decimal. So what I mean is this. Let me write here. In my JavaScript, when you in numbers, when you have one or two or three or four, these are considered integers. Okay. But once you have 1.0 or 1.1, these ones are now considered floats. Okay. So these ones without decimals are integers, while these ones are floats. That's how we JavaScript does all it floats, they are all numbers. So that is um the first primitive data type, numbers. This one is strings, and it says any data under single quotes, double quotes, or backtick quotes. Okay, so what this means is once I write either a single quote, which is this. Let me zoom in so you can see. So this is a single quote, or this this is double quotes. Then the last one says backtick. So you might not be used to this backtick. Let me zoom in a little bit so you see this. Okay. So how do you get this backtick? This backtick is gotten when you look at the first button before one. So on the keyboard, if you look at the top left, right, under escape button, there is a button there. Okay. So when you hold shift and you press that button, you will get this. This is what we call backtick. So when you write anything between this either one or a, okay, so let me say I write one here, and here I write A, B, C, and here I write maybe a symbol. Okay. So what JavaScript is saying is that all of these things here are considered strings. Sorry. Okay. So why these are considered numbers, right? These are considered strings. So strings are how we represent alphabets or text in JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out now. Okay, it's good that we've established that. So these are the two data types we discussed so far. The first is numbers, and the next is strings. So let's see the next set of primitive data types. In other words, original, right? So the next is the booleans. So in programming, anytime you hear booleans, your mind should go to true or false. That's what booleans are, bools or booleans. So true or false. So these are not text. So it means in JavaScript when you see true. So if you see I'm not writing this inside, I'm not writing it inside a quote, right? Because if I write this inside a quote, it no longer becomes a boolean. It is now a string. Okay. So when you have this, this is considered a boolean. So boolean is like this. So boolean is either true or false in programming generally. Okay. So the next type of data type is null. Null is you might not meet this now, but I show you as you progress, you start meeting more of null. It has its own importance. So null is an empty value. Okay, when there is nothing, is referred to as null. Then you have undefined. So and I have to explain what a variable is. So so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to explain what a variable is. So, but variables are not data types. Okay, so variables are not data types. So let's go on to discover what variables are. So from here, there is a small description of what variables are. It says variables are containers of data. Variables are used to store data in a memory location. When a variable is declared, a memory location is reserved. When a variable is assigned to a value, the memory space should be filled with that data. To declare a variable, we use let, or const keywords. So what all of this text is trying to say is that variable is just a container where you store a particular data. You can picture it as a box where you store your clothes. All right. So in this concept, your clothes is now considered a data, right? And so, how do you create this container called variable? It is created using three specific keywords: var, let, or const. So, which means aside creating a variable, you can't use any of this keyword anymore in JavaScript. So if you're not trying to create a variable in JavaScript, do not use this keyword for any purpose, not even as text or anything, right? So they are reserved in JavaScript, just as we'll see other keywords that are reserved in JavaScript. Their key function or key purpose is to create a variable in order to store data. So what do we mean? So let's say we want to store numbers, right? We want to store a number, all right, in a variable called x. So you can say you want to declare a variable. Declare means create. So right now I'm using the var keyword. So an x. So this means I am declaring x a variable, which means I am creating a variable and I'm naming it x. This is what this means. So var x, then I say equal to 5. So let me start again. So I said this part is declaring a variable x. So right now I've declared a variable x. You can give it any name you want. So once I do this, I have only declared a variable x. But right now it doesn't have any value inside of it. It doesn't have any data stored inside of it until I now assign a value. And in JavaScript, we use equal to assign a value. So when I do this and I say 3, I have assigned the value 3, which is of number value, into a variable that I created and I named it x. Okay, so this is how we create variables and we put in a value into it. So this is how your how variables are created in JavaScript. You will see more of this almost every time you're writing a JavaScript code, you're creating a variable. Okay, so this is what variable is. So now back to defining or explaining what undefined. Undefined means it says a declared variable without a value. So which means when I declare this variable x just like this without assigning any value to it, so it is of a data type of undefined. Okay, so it is of a data type of undefined at this point. So when I say, right? So once I now assign a value to it, let's say 5, the data type of x now changes from undefined, it changes to the data type of the value I am putting into it, which means this value has a data type of 5. So it means that this variable x is now having a data type of number. Okay, because 5 is a number, so x is now change this to false. It means data type boolean. As you can see when I highlight it, you can see the small box. Variables by default take up the value of the data stored inside of them. So instead of this, if I now do it in a quote, be it singular or double, data type of x now becomes a string. Are you there? Can you confirm you can hear me?
I'm just hearing you now.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, um, in essence, you should bear in mind that the data type of a variable is dependent on its value. So it is only when it doesn't have any value inside of it that its data type becomes undefined. So now let's go to the last type of data type. The last type is called symbol. Says a unique value that can be generated by symbol constructor. So later on, you would see us using and you see us using this. Sorry, this. All right, these are considered these are considered symbols. Okay, so later you see their purpose in JavaScript. But for now, these are the primitive data types. The original data types would be working with. So let's go over to the next, the non-primitive data types, right? Okay, so while we have about 6 different primitive data types, we have 2 primitive data types, the objects and the arrays. And like I said, the non-primitive data types, they are dependent on the primitive data types for their values. So first, okay, it says objects first, but I like to talk about arrays first. Let me see array. Okay, it doesn't explain it yet. So let's see. So it says non-primitive data types in JavaScript includes objects and arrays. Um, so now let's see what exactly primitive and non-primitive data types means. Okay, it's just going back to explain a couple of things. Okay, so now let's consider this example we are talking about. Let's see, because from this we need to be able to talk about all of all of this. So there's no need rushing them. Let's take them one after the other. So let's see this. So this is an example of creating a variable word, and then assigning a value of JavaScript as a string into it. Okay. So it's the same thing we did here. So it can be the same thing as this. Then you say JavaScript. So, but now the difference is over here, they are making use of lets, right? But in our code, we are making use of R. That's the only difference. Okay. So remember, we can also create a variable using const. We can also create a variable using const. So let me duplicate this. Okay, let me duplicate this, and I'll make this let and this variable y. Sorry, give me a minute. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, yes,
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Okay. So what I am doing now is creating two different variables. I'm going to take this off because I'm getting error from output. So in JavaScript, unlike HTML and CSS, when you write a code the wrong way, it it highlights those things you're doing by showing you red, and then it lets you know that there's an error with your code. All right. So that's how programming languages are. They always throw errors once you're doing something wrong, because the computer is garbage in, garbage out. It is what you give to it, it gives out to you. And so what you're giving to it, if it has an error in it, it lets you know that there is an error with what you're giving to me. So now I am creating a variable y, and I'm passing in this value of JavaScript to it. And also here, I'm creating a variable x, and I'm passing it a variable called JavaScript to it. So it means y and x has the same value of JavaScript. So now, what is the difference between creating a variable using lets, and what is the difference when you create it with const? So what we do here is that when you create a variable with lets, it means along your code, anytime in your code, you can come down and edit or change the value of that variable. So I can come here and say, okay, I want y to now be equal to 5. I no longer want it to be JavaScript. Okay, so this is understandable. So the code understands that, okay, over here you're you're changing the value of y to 5. Okay, so but when you create a variable with const, Okay, it means you are making this variable a constant. That means you can no longer change that value and that variable anywhere in your code. So you can come down here and say x should now be equal to, let's say I want to make it to be 6.0. This is wrong, okay, because we created x with the variable with the variable keyword of course. So while let or var can be changed anytime, const can no longer be changed. Once you create a variable with const, it has to be that value consistently. Okay, that is it. So now, if you want to print this on your console, okay, there is a certain keyword to use because, like I said, JavaScript is a browser-side programming language. So, which means it runs only on the browser. You can't see it running on your PS4 like that. So it is only when you have Node.js. Node.js is now an environment that allows you run your JavaScript outside a browser. And so because it is a browser side code, we can only see it in our browser. So right now in our HTML page, which is this, if you want to see your JavaScript code running on your console, I'm going to show you what a console is. So remember previous classes when we talked about our developers toolbox, right? When you right click and you scroll down to inspect and you go to inspect, it will open up a model by the right hand side. Okay. So remember we've been using this part for debugging our HTML and CSS code. But now we'll be switching over to console. So over here, there is an arrow here that says more tabs. So when you click on it, other options come up. So you go to your console. So this is your console. So any error you have running on your code, this is where you'll be able to see it. And as you can see now, it is showing us an error that says uncaught type error, and it says assignment to constant variable. And then it calls the line in which that error is occurring. So it says in your script.js file, in line 5, that is where this error is occurring. So if I go to my JavaScript code and I go to line 5, you see this. And the error spelled out here says type error assignment to constant variable, which means you're trying to assign a value to a variable you created as a constant. So because that is an error, it is giving us this error. So now if I go back and take it off and I save, if I go back now, you don't see any error on your console anymore. Okay? This is what we call the console. Okay, so now for you to print out things on this console from your code, there is a specific line JavaScript has created for us to enable us print things to our console. So if I want to print out Y in our console, all I have to do is say console.log, okay, then Y. So let me explain what this is. So what this line means is that log simply means print. Okay. So what this means is print out the value of Y in our console. And as we've explained that in our browser, this is our console. Okay. So here it's saying print the value of Y in our console. So if I save this, I'm sure you expect to see Y printed out on the console. But now if I go to our console, I see 5 printed out in our console. Okay, so this is to explain to you that because we pass down Y like this, it is taking Y as a variable, and so it is printing the value of that variable to us in our console. So if I actually wanted to print out y as a text in our console, I would now have to put this as a string. Okay, so now this means print out the string y in the console. So once I save this, we now see y printed out on our console. Okay, so this is how you print out things in your console. Okay, I don't have to digress to explain a couple of things. So now we wrote the okay. So now we are going to consider this line of code again. That says let word be equal to this. So let's write it here in our code. So I will take off these lines of code and then I'll change this y to word. So y here is no longer a string. This is now a variable word. So if I want to print it out, all I have to do is say console.log word. So like this, it prints out the value of word on our console. So if you go, you see JavaScript printed out here. So now let's see the example it's trying to point out. It says if we try to modify the string stored in variable word, JavaScript should raise an error. Any data type under a single quote, double quote, or string is a string data type. So this expression does not change the string stored in the variable word. So we can say that strings are not modifiable or in any words immutable. Okay, so which means we can't change this this these strings. Strings on its own are not modifiable. They cannot be edited. Okay, but variables, on the other hand, can be edited. We'll see what that means. Let's try this line of code here that they did word O. So what this is saying is inside this variable of word, go to the first element, all right, or index 0. How do I explain this? Okay, let's do it like this. So let me write it first. So this line of code, console.log word, is printing out the entire JavaScript to us, right? So now, when in addition to this, we now add square brackets, and inside that square bracket, we now put in a value of 0. So 0 here is considered an index, or in other words, it's considered a position. So this means the first position of the variable word, and the first position is here. J is the first position. So if I console, or if I save this and I go back to my code, all I see printed out is J, which means um, 0 says the first position. So it's neglecting the remaining text at the other position. If I increase this from 0 to 1, okay, what should be printed out now will now be A to say the second position. So if I come back, you see A printed out. Okay, so this is what index is in programming, right? So index is like a particular position at which something is done. So string is like a set of characters positioned at specific positions, all right, located at specific position. So J is a character, is an alphabet. A is a character or an alphabet, all right? So bringing each of these alphabets together, it needs to be in a specific position for them to make meaning. If I take it away from here and I put it here, changes what this means entirely. Make explain it to you. If I take A back to its position, it now shows a means Java which is familiar to you. Okay, so that's what it is. So this is just a means of getting each of each of these characters at their specific is what God brackets does. So console log just goes to printing out that value to you. So this line of code also exists like this. Okay, it can exist, but now it will no longer be printed on your console. If I go to so you see nothing is printed out here. Okay, because I am not printing it out on the console. So it is only when I do console.log, then I am not printing out the value I want on console. Okay. So please, if you are falling behind at any point, feel free to ask the question so I can go over there. Yeah. Okay. So we'll be going into we're talking about the non-primitive data types info. So remember I said the non-primitive data types are objects and arrays. Firstly, we're going to consider an array. Okay. And, what's an array? How we know something is an array when you see them written inside square brackets. First of all, it needs to be written inside a square bracket. And secondly, each of the items in an array has to be separated with a comma. Okay, so what is an array? An array is a data type that contains different data, both primitive and non-primitive, and each of those items are separated with a comma. So, which means we can have an array or a container of 1, 2, and 3. So, this array is like a container that has stored three different types of data types, three different data types of numbers. So, it's storing 1, 2, and 3. There are different items inside this array. All right, so it's like you have a school bag, and inside your school bag, you have a book, you have a pen, you have a pencil, you have an eraser. All right, that's what these non-primitive, it's just non-primitive data types. That's what they are. They're like containers for storing data types. But now the thing is, you can also store a non-primitive data type inside it. So it means when I have this, I can also have another array this inside this array. So the first array is, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. The first array, if you see properly, is colored yellow. The first square bracket is colored yellow. While the second one I just created now is colored purple. Okay. So just to show you the difference that they are two is this array opens here and ends here, while this other one opens here and ends here. Okay. So I can store in this. So inside this array, I can now have probably text written or stored inside it, B or C. So it means in this first array, which starts here and ends here, the first item inside it is 1, the second item is 2, the third item is 3, the fourth item is this entire array as a whole. Okay, so it means there are 4 items inside this array. There are 4 items inside this array, and it is not necessarily um, one particular data type. It can be mixed. This can be a text. This can be a string. This can be a boolean. Let's say true. So I now have different data types stored inside it. So this is what an array is. So what you should know is that once you see square brackets and you see different things inside it, with a comma, it is no longer, it is now an array. So you might be asking, what is the difference between this square and this square? Okay, so the difference is, sorry, the difference is the context in between which they are being used. Okay, so over here, this square bracket is used to show an index, but here it is used to store different items inside it. And so this is different. This one. Okay, so just as you can create, just like we did, we created a variable word and assigned a value of 10 to it. You can also create a variable, assign array into it. So over here, I can now say, let let's create, let me declare an array called a arrow arrow, or I can call it array for short. But let me use a arrow arrow, and then using the equal to, I can assign the value to it. Okay. So notice, you don't have to let go of the base, because instead of using string and numbers, and now we introduce an array, and we also talk about variables, and now you can see us joining all of these things together. Okay, so that's what JavaScript is. You tend to join different things, different things together to make it come. So what we are doing here is we are declaring a variable just like before. And now instead of putting either one, two, or three, or text, or boolean, we are now assigning the value of an array. So which means console.log. Okay. So it means in my console, I want to log the value of array. So once I do it and I go back, you know, see the same thing with here shown here. Only difference is now the second array we made is now has now been made formed as has now been structured in a different way. So right there is an arrow, it, and it comes up, so you can see each of the items. Okay? And just before it, you can see a number that we didn't create. We didn't create this number 0, 1, 2, 3. We didn't create it in the either of them. Okay. You see the number and then you one, which is to tell you that this first item is at an index of 0, which means it is at its first position. This second one is at the 12, which means it is at the second position. Okay, let us continue. So this, as you can see, an array which is a non-primitive data type is mutable. Okay, so you can edit the values of an array. Okay, non-primitive data types cannot be compared by value. These are more theory information you can read and compare or get used to them. Okay, okay, we'll get here. We'll get here.
this super is array. This is where we are going to stop array for now. There is more to array, but we are now going to introduce one data type that is set non-primitive data type. So let me just comment this out. Okay, so this is how we've created an array. So the second non-primitive data type is called an object. So how we know something is an object is when it is created with curly brackets. Okay, this is an object. This is considered an object. I was trying to look for it here, and I couldn't find it. This is over there. Okay. Once the system is created with object curly brackets, right, it's considered an object. Now, the difference between this and array is that firstly, it is curly brackets, not brackets. And secondly, it is not a key and a value pair. Okay, so it is a pair of two, a key and value. So we need to have a key before we assign a value. Okay, so like the array here where we just separate one and two values. In JavaScript here, in objects rather, we don't just write them this and separate them like this. Okay, we need a key, a value. So in other words, we can create an object as a human, right? So let's say a boy, right? So now this boy has specific properties that are peculiar to him. That once you know these properties, you know that this particular boy you're talking about. An example of those things are his name, his age, his color. Okay, so this is how objects work. So firstly, you can see the name is the key. Okay, the name is the first key. So you write the key and then you write quotes and columns, and then you cannot write you can write the value. The value should be like a string. So let's say the name is Felix. Okay, you cannot use comma. So this is now the first property of boy, which has a key name and a value of Felix. The next to let's say um, let's say the next would be his color or his color, the skin, what so we cannot say the skin is black. So I am writing this um as string because I don't write that as variables or as numbers. They are not, they are strings, they are text, right? So that is why I am doing this. So now you can see here I'm having an error. There is a small red here that's giving me an error. And if I highlight on it, it says expected. If you look over here, it expected column. It means this I'm using is wrong syntax for now. So it should be a semicolon. Sorry, my system is lagging a little bit. So let's give it 1 minute. Okay. So as it has been, I'm moving to main application right here. So it's lagging. Okay. Okay, we are back now. So now when I save with column, I no longer get that error. Okay. So with this, I'm able to create objects that has two properties, or two items inside. The first item is name Felix, The second is right, and say the third with key and value pair. You have a key and then you have its value. So I can have a new one, let's say age, and I say the age should be, let's say 18, right? So 18 should be a number. So there's no need to add something like this. So instead, I'll do 18 as in, and it will work perfectly. It will work well like this. So as you can see, I'm writing them on space lines, right? This doesn't make any difference. It's written like on a straight line, like this. Okay. It doesn't change it if it's in an object. It's still an object regardless, right? So we only leave it this way because it's more clear for developers to see and read. Okay, it is we create this method to easily straight. All right, and we said non-primitive data types can also store other non-primitive data types. So which means this object can also have an object inside it, or it can have an array inside it. So now let's say this particular person has set of skills, set of programming skills, right? So you know it is not just one. So let's say it has HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills. We can't just write them one single skill. It needs to be stored one after the other. So can I say I have a variable, a probably key of skill, and now this skill I want to put it inside an array. So I can ask you the first skill it has is HTML, comma. The second one is CSS, comma. The one is JavaScript, and I change this. So you can now see that I've been able to use an array inside an object. Okay. So now let's store this object inside this variable. So I can say first is equal to. We've been using let so much. So let me change this to now I change this to const, or let's say let either of them, and I now see this red arrow in again. So this means once you're storing a variable, you do not separate the items using columns anymore. You separate them using commas. So it will be hard for you to get a hand of this. You would make this mistake again. But once you make this mistake, it could be on you that okay, you encounter this mistake somewhere else and you're supposed to say somebody use command. So when you're creating a variable, an object without storing a variable, it is okay to separate um, using semicolon. Once you are storing it in a variable, they should be separated using commas. So now I can now say let us console.log our person variable, which is an object. Okay. So once I do that and I go to my code, you can see printed out on our console is an object that we just created so far, and the rest is a key and a pair. Okay, so this is object primitive, non-primitive data type, and this is array non-primitive data. Okay, so this the data types we have in Java. Aside this, we no longer have any other data in JavaScript. So, is there any question on this so far? Is there any or anything that's considered so far?
Yes, I have a question, sir.
Okay, go on.
In our HTML5, when we want to add our CSS file to our HTML5, we add it in the head. But this one we're adding it in the body. I want to ask, if we add it in the head, is there any problem in there, or we can add it anywhere? I just want to know, maybe it's
Oh,
the head or in the body, sir.
that's actually a good question. So over here when we were adding our Java CSS, we added it in the head tag, right? But now in JavaScript, we are now putting it here into the body tag. Okay. So this is this. JavaScript is a programming language, which means it has to be compiled. A couple of things have to be done on it before it loads on our browser. So which means it will take time for it loads. So which means your HTML might load very fast, very quick before your JavaScript code will not load. Okay. So if it happens like that, it means probably when you start clicking on a button that's supposed to change the color of your screen, it will not work because the JavaScript code has not loaded yet, or the HTML file is loaded. And so doing this is because you want to be sure, you want to be sure, and you want to be certain that your HTML code, all of it, loads up first on your browser before the JavaScript can now load, which means your functions will work on it will allow your browser or your HTML to load first before your JavaScript will now start working. Okay, so if you instead want to instead of importing it here, if you want to import it here also, it is still possible. Okay? But here, what will happen is that your functions will work because your HTML is loaded and your JavaScript is loading. What you will do here is that you will have to introduce a new attribute called defer. So what defer does is that it now behave as if you're calling the script tag to your body. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're calling your script tag inside your head tag, make sure you use defer. Otherwise, most of JavaScript code will not work. You see that you're writing a clean JavaScript code, but it is not working for you. So if you don't want to put it inside your head tag, you can now take it and call it into your body tag. So that is why we did this for putting our JavaScript file. Is this now clear?
Yes, sir, it is clear. It is clear. Now I understand that if I want to put it in my head, I have to put deeper there. So if I don't need deeper, I have to put it in the body. Yes, I understand that. Thank you, sir.
All right. All right. Thank you very much for actually asking that question. So I had it in mind to even introduce this at the start of the class. I think I just got carried away other things I forgot to talk about. So asking these questions just brought me back to that point. So thank you for bringing it up. Is there any other question so far on things we discussed before we move on to the next? No. Okay. So since there isn't any other thing to discuss about, I would um I would go on to explain a few things about strings. Okay, so it's somehow referred to as methods. Okay, but first let's go to string concatenation. Okay, the reason is because if we don't talk about it now, we would somehow run into them probably when you're taking up a project with somebody or going through somebody's code, and it might seem confusing to you. So string concatenation is connecting two or more strings together. Okay, so adding together is called concatenation in general. So which means in my JavaScript, let me take this in. So let's say I have word one, which is JavaScript, and I have another variable called word two, and let me say this is TypeScript. So TypeScript a is an improvement on JavaScript. All right, it is more should I say type conscious. All right, as professional developers use TypeScript. So for now, we'll just stick with TypeScript. So if I want to have a complete text, let's have a variable called full word, which is supposed to be a combination of two variables I've talked about. So because it is a string, I can join them together, okay, by saying word one plus word two, okay, and now I can say console dot log full word. So what I'm doing here is I am joining word one and word two, which is these two together, all right, and then whatever I get as a value, I am adding it into this variable called full word. And down here, I am trying to print full like console. Let's go to our console. So I now see JavaScript and TypeScript here joined together without any space to it. So this is what we consider as concatenation. So for most of the time, we would want space between them, right? It's ideal they should have a they're supposed to have a space. Okay? Because of the idea of concatenation, what we can do is between the first one and the second one, we can concatenate another string by saying by releasing two equals, then using another plus time. So this is we are concatenating this variable word one, then we are um had statically adding a space, right, by using string space, right, then we are adding this other word variable was 2 together. So now, if I save this and I go back to my console, you now see a space created. Okay, this space is created because of that code space we use for that here. So this is what string concatenation is. So now we are going to test our knowledge with a small web application that is going to ask us for two inputs. So it's going to ask us for our first name and it's also to ask us for our last name. And at the end of the day, we want to join our first name and our last name together and make a sentence. Say sentence be my name is, let's say, Gogo Philip. Okay, so this will be dynamic. These values will be dynamic. It will be based on our inputs. Okay, so let's actually write that code now. So in JavaScript, there is a simple um, function that lets us um, input the value, and it is prompts. Called prompts. So what prompt does is that it throws up a dialog box for you to put in a value. So let me just do this. Let me do this. Now, if I go to my browser, I see you will see a dialog box that comes up, okay, and it's expects you to put in a value. If I don't put a value, just say here, and I just put in a random text, and I okay, it now goes off. So once done, then the HTML download. Okay, so with this, we should be able to store whatever value we put in there. Right. So let's see how I can do that. But first, I want to be throw in a question. So right now, all this does is that it just gives us an input box that doesn't really describe what we want it to. It doesn't tell us to put in something. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say inside it, I'm going to put a value that says enter your first name. And let me save this. So once I save it and I go back to my browser, the process has returned. Okay, so once I save this, I go back to my browser. You now see a box. For now, at the top of it, you see text randomly wrote inside um, the prompt says enter your first name. Okay, so now whoever is accessing this our application now knows that they're supposed to put in their first name in it. Okay. So we are going gradually. So I write the code one step at a time. So what I want to do is store the values the person put in here. So how we can do that is by creating a variable. So let's create a variable that says let's say the variable name is first name. So what this piece of code is doing is that once I load my browser, it would pop a dialog box requesting that to change the first name. So once I put a name in that, it will take whatever value I put in there and it will store it inside this variable of first name. Okay. So now if I console.log first name and I save, let's go back. Let me go to this and reload. So we know we are in. So it throws up this dialog box. Enter my first name. My first name is Gogo, so I put in Gogo, right? So once I click OK, you see something printed up here on our console, Gogo, which means we've been able to request the user to put in a value. And once put in that value, we've been able to store that value into a variable, which is good, which means we are making progress. So for us to get the last name of the user, we need to create this again. So we can create another dialog prompt. For now, we'll change this to last name, and we'll store it inside last name variable instead of first name this time. Okay, so with this, we are able to get the first name and last name. So you can console.log more than one value. So what I'm them but with a comma in my console.log. So let's go here. So if I put my first name, which is Google, and I say OK, to bring another box that says enter your last name, and I'll put my last name. And go. Okay, so we now have a way of storing the values of our first name and last name. So what is remaining for us to complete this application that prints out this is that it should console.log a statement. Okay, so we want it here to console.log my name is Bobo Ibimina. This is what we want to print out. Okay, but we want this value to be dynamic, all right, based on what the user inputs here. So what we can do is we can say it should print my name is and a space here, or we can take out this space and let's try this out and see plus this plus our first name variable, first name plus our last name. So now what this is doing is that it is going to print my name is and concatenate this space with created here, then concatenate it with first name, the value of first name, and also the value of last name. So once I save this and go back to our page, it says enter your first name. Let me change the value. Let me say Ryan. I say okay. It now says enter your last name. So I say David. And once I click OK, you can now see it printing my name is Ryan David. So now there is a little bug. What we consider bug in programming is mistake, right? So we have to find this bug and fix it. The bug is that I need a space to be between Ryan and David. But right now they are joined together. And you can already tell how we can fix that if you've been following from what we've been discussing from the beginning. Now, right now, we're just concatenating first name and last name without a space between them. So we can do that by easily doing this. So this year of will now be able to fix that. Okay. So with this, we'll be able to create a simple application or a simple web app that requests for a user's detail. All right, and when you put in that detail, it's randomly creates a sentence for you on our console.log. But this is because you are console.logging it to our console. There are other things like alerts. So alerts can pop up something, it can pop up a dialog box on it pops up a message on your screen. I decide to use alerts. So all of these are functions already existing in JavaScript. You don't have to write them. All right, things like alerts, things like lets, things like prompts, things like console.log. JavaScript have already created these tools for you, so you don't have to create it on your own. All you have to do is follow the documentations and know how to use them. So now I'm using alerts, so which means if I put in Ibimina, okay, last name Gogo, I say okay, it brings up this dialog box on my screen that does the same thing console.logs does, but now we are having it as a dialog box on our screen here. And once I click OK, it takes it out and we can continue. So that's the difference between alerts and console.log. So based on what effect you want, that is what you will use. So it's either you use alerts or you use console.log. But for your applications, most time you might not use console.log. Console.log most times are used for debugging. All right, you might be facing a problem somewhere in your code, so you use console.log to actually see where those errors are coming from. Would there be any questions so far on this information? Would there be anything that wasn't clear so I can go over it? None? Okay, okay, that's fine. So also, you can still carry out um, this particular process in a different way. It doesn't mean your own code is bad or not. Like somebody else can do this in a different way. What I mean is, I can create a new variable and say let full name be equal to first name plus space plus last name, and over here I would now remove all of this and put full name. Right? This is still the same as what we've done before. It's just that I'm now cutting out small pieces of this code, all right, and joining them together. So this is the same thing. And likewise, this last one. So let me explain this last one because we talked about backticks also for strings, right? So which means I can also have something like this. A backtick instead of single quotes that says my name is okay. But now the power of this backtick is that it will be able to allow you write a variable inside it. So not just a string, you cannot write a variable inside it. So how do you write a variable inside it? To signify that you want to write a variable inside it, we introduce other symbols, which is the $sign and the curly brackets. So anything you write inside here will now be taken as a variable. And the first variable I want is the first name. Okay. And then space. last name. So what this will do is that we no longer need the plus sign to concatenate strings anymore, right? We don't need all of those anymore. So we're just having one straight string. Okay, for now, we now have the power to directly fix in variables inside them. All right, that's why we now have this variable here and this variable here. So the reason is because if you just write these variables without these curly brackets, it will take it as a string, just as it has been taking every other thing. Okay, so introducing this dollar sign and curly brackets now makes us gives us the power to introduce a variable inside it. So if I save this and go on to my application, it says first name, I put in Ibirina, say okay. It says last name, I go with Google. Okay, it still gives us the same effects, the same application we've been doing. No changes, no changes here, right? So it is just a different syntax. It's just a different way of writing that same code. Okay, so these are different ways or different options you can consider whenever you want to do something like this. Either of them is correct, none of them is wrong. So I don't know if you have any question on that. If you have any question on that, you can ask the questions. Okay, none. Um, okay, so I'm going to introduce us to a few string methods. So we can't finish all of them, but on your own, you can read through these documentations and you see different methods and see how powerful they are, how powerful they can be. So first of all, I would talk about lengths, dot lengths. So what are methods, by the way? Right. So methods are functions that are specific to a particular data type. Okay. So functions are like reusable variables or reusable codes that carry out a specific operation. Okay. So it carries out a specific operation. So the first method we want to learn is length, because methods are functions that are specific to a particular data type. So which means this length is specific to string types, right? So the string length, the string length method returns the number of characters in a string. So if over here I say, let me take all of this out so I don't have to write all of those long things. So if I select word be equal to JavaScript, right? Over here, I can say console.log word.length. Okay. So what this will do is that it will calculate the length of my variable. It calculates the length of my variable, which is the value rather, right? These values, it will calculate how many values are, how many characters are inside, and it will print it out. So now if I go back to this, you see 10 printed out. So let's count it to be sure. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Exactly 10 characters. Okay, that is what this method does. So method returns the number of a string for string, using it for a string. Okay, so get used to that because we also see it in arrays as well. So that is the first method. The second method would be to uppercase as well as to lowercase, right? So this is So right now, our variable what is capitalized, which means the first letter is in capital letter, is in uppercase, while the rest are in small letters. So for me to convert this directly to uppercase, just like we did in CSS, where we use text transform. Here, what to do is there's a method that directly transforms your text to uppercase. So if I do to uppercase here, you find out that it will convert them, it will convert your string to uppercase. Okay, so this one um needs a parenthesis to signify that you're calling the function. So these methods operate differently based on it. So that's why I need the documentation. Because sometimes you might call a method without why you forget that it needs parentheses to be called. Okay, because some of these methods you need to pass in extra values, extra attributes to them. So when I do this and I go back to my console, you can see that they are now all in uppercase. Okay, so that is what uppercase or uppercase does for you, while lowercase does the exact opposite of this for you. Um, these concepts are just to prepare our minds for the later complex logics of JavaScript to be getting into. So leave this substring and the rest for now. Leave splits, leave string. Uh, okay, we'll leave all of this now. We'll still with the length, the lowercase, and the uppercase because those are what we would use most often. Okay. So let's see how we change data types. Okay. It is not for everything because you can't change this to number, right? For now, let's say we have we created a variable called number and the value of that number is 300. So this data is the number, okay? But we convert it to a string, okay? We can convert this to a string by it's not here. So let me show you how you convert this to a string. Right? So how to convert it to a string? So put this is a variable and you put it inside bracket and you say dollar sign curly bracket and you put number, right? What this do is that it will take the value of number, all right, and directly convert it to string for you. So when you go to your browser over here and you see this string, it is showing here not as a number, but showing as a string. But for now, we will not really be able to um, see it as a string or tell the difference with string or not. For later on, when we do other things to see. But let's say this is a string of 300 by default, right? Let's say this is a string of 300 by default. So the data type or the data here is a string, but its value is a number because 300 is a number, right? It is not it's not a text. A text a text would be this or three 300. This is a number. This is right? So this is a number, but because it is inside the double quotes, it is automatically a string, considered a string. But can be able to convert it to um, an integer by using this method called parseInt. ParseInt, all right, parseInt, because you're converting it to an int, right? And parse float, because you want to convert it to a float. Okay, so if over here, if over here I create a new variable and I say int num, and I say it is equal to half int and curly and brackets. So inside here, and now pass in the variable as a whole. It will convert this value you have here, 300. It will convert it to a number and store it inside this new variable. Let's an example. Let's be sure that we are correct. Let's say this is number one. And then we copy and paste it. And say this is number two. And I'll make this 500. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying int number one, int number two. So what I'm doing here is I'm converting this first one to a number, 300 as a number, and storing it inside a new variable called num1. Then over here, I'm converting number two, which is by default a string. I'm converting it to the number 500 and storing it inside this variable. Now, I want to console.log int num1 plus int num2. So remember, if this is a string, should concatenate it instead of adding it or simplifying it as a number. Okay? So if it is a number, it should show us 800. But if it is a string, it